Hi there, this is Drew again, and here we'll be installing the file server role for Windows Server 2016. Now this is a series of videos, and so far we have created a domain with two DCs. We've set up and configured DHCP and DNS as well, and we've used a Windows 7 computer to test out our features. In this one, we will configure our file server to have a reserved IP in DHCP, and we'll install the file server role, and then we'll review kind of best practices for how to apply permissions for users and groups that would also apply to the file share. Next, in the next video, we'll actually be creating those users and groups and stuff. This is just to try and minimize how short these videos are to try and keep your attention. So here, the best practice is you probably have a whole bunch of users in your domain. You want to apply users to groups. And just in itself, those groups don't do anything. They're just a placeholder to group different departments or similar types of users. Now similarly, you want to do the same thing for your file shares. You'll have a file share for your HR department, and then you'll want to give some people read access to that file share, or maybe not, and then other people will be able to have read-write access to that file share. So you'll want to come up with your own naming convention. Over the years, this is what I like to do. FS for file share, so I know that this group applies only to a file share, and then the name of the file share on the server. And again, I'm not mentioning the server name because that could change over time. You might upgrade it, but the share name is always going to stay the same for your users, typically anyways. And then at the end, you have what kind of permissions. So here this is read-write permissions, and then here we have read permissions for a different kind of user group. And then after you have your group set up, after you have your group set up, you can apply the two together. So then these two groups are tied together, and you can manage it that way. Oops, sorry, messing up here. So yeah, that's what this link here is to say, that the salespeople have read permission to the HR folder, which you probably don't want to do, but maybe this is more like a public area that people can refer to get documents and stuff. Now, that doesn't always suit everybody's needs. So, what if there's a subfolder that you want to have permissions in? Well, again, let's say this person here is part of the USA HR department. Did I name that the same? HR department, sales department, and HR USA department. So here we can see that USA department is going to get read-write access to the USA folder. But in this example anyways, we're going to say that they don't have any access to view the files and folders in the HR folder. They can only see this folder here. So the share will be at this level. They'll be able to access this share, but they won't be able to edit or view any documents in there except for this folder and what's inside of that folder. So we'll demonstrate that. And so let's get into it. I talked for 4 minutes. 1 second. So that's the theory behind it. And here we can see that we have the file server. It's joined to the domain. And we will set up a reservation so this file server IP address doesn't change. Okay, we've got DHCP open. Oops. We'll go into our scope for 192.168.10.0 reservations, create new reservation, and we're going to say file 1 Canada, and we'll give it an IP address of, let's say 9. The MAC address is over here. Again, we can see file1-canada is the host name, and here's the MAC address. 0800275E0025. Oops. Must have made a typo in here. 0800275E 0025. Close. Okay, so now if I release and renew that, renew. Refresh. Okay, so we have the IP address, and now we'll start to set up the role. That isn't required. You could have a you could have a dynamic IP address for your file server, but it's generally not a good idea. So this wizard, we've seen it lots before. I'm not going to go over too much detail, but we do want to install the file server role on this specific server. And we'll get into the extra features later. We'll click install, and that's pretty much it. So what that will do is in our list of services here, we'll see actually, we'll be able to click on File and Storage Services here. This is always installed by default as a requirement for the operating system, but now we'll have a bit more features in there when this is completed. Okay, so that is completed. You just have to close the window. Now we can expand this and start to offer file shares. If we click on the volumes here, we can see that there's a system reserved volume and a fixed volume for the operating system. There's no shares at the moment, but we could create them here. It tells you a bit about the disk. It also tells you if there's any deduplication happening on one of these disks or volumes. If we click on this, we can see any disks that are maybe available to be used or others. Storage pools are a bit more advanced features, but very cool. Shares, here we can create a new share in this area, use some of the volumes and quotas, which we'll talk about in another video. iSCSI shares, which are in the next upcoming videos. We'll try and demonstrate that, and work folders as well. That's down the road. So kind of a quick basic overview of this, and in the next video we'll actually get into some of those features. And just as a reminder here, oops, open. So far we have this lab.local domain. We've set up this site in Active Directory with the subnet. We've created the Active Directory with our DC1 with the 5 FSMA roles. DNS is configured, DHCP and DHCP failover is configured, but it's not in a cluster just yet. We have DC2 set up with all of those services, but again, DHCP isn't in a cluster. And now we're just working on this one file server, and we have the role installed for the file server, and those other features will come later. So I'll end the video and jump into the next one here really quick.